went on the programs at 8:30, either with myself or Anton Heinlein or Jerry Allen, and looked at the developing Union line. And so we now know that the main Union line begins in the block of woods there to the southeast of us. If you look down the corridor of the Lafayette Road, you see the Kentucky Monument standing there along the road. The Union line begins, the main part of it begins in that block of woods to the southeast of the Kentucky Monument. It runs up onto the crest of a low rise and then runs southward. And that line begins to take on the shape of, when viewed from south to north, of kind of a question mark. It is curved or bowed out, or a semicircle around the Kelly Field, looping around the northeast corner of the Kelly Field, and also around the southeast corner of the Kelly Field, and then stretching southward on the west side of the Lafayette Road. Now, George Thomas had originally wanted to extend the line further to the west. They did not initially think they had enough troops to extend it further north. Thomas wanted to deploy Negley's division in the woods there across the McDonald Fields, extending the line westward. And at the time of the Civil War, there was more open ground to our southwest. And in fact, this McDonald Field connected with the Mullis Fields and the Snodgrass Fields, and you would have been able to see clearly the trees up on Snodgrass Hill at the Snodgrass farmstead. And on the open spur of the Snodgrass Hill mass to the east of the cabin, Frank Smith's Battery I, 4th U.S. Artillery, has gone into position to potentially be able to fire on this ground and cover this ground. So you're now on the area to the left of the Union line. Captain Gall of Thomas's staff, misunderstanding what Thomas had desired, has ordered John Beatty's brigade, which had been deployed across the Lafayette Road just south of the Kentucky Monument in the woods between the McDonald Fields and the Kelly Field, had ordered Beatty's brigade to essentially conduct a broad white right wheel and swing up from that position and move across this ground and into the woods to the east of the road and deploy along the crest of the low rise north of where Baird's division was on the line. Beatty was supposed to cover the entire sector that Negley's division, by Gall's reckoning, was supposed to be. How can one brigade cover a full division sector? Negley was having to spread his regiments out. The two Indiana regiments were wheeling through this ground, and in fact their monuments are across the road in the McDonald Field there, and right up by the intersection of the Reeds Bridge and Lafayette Road. They had gotten about that far in their wheel and move eastward to get up onto the low rise of ground. The Bridges, Illinois battery is being deployed by half battery to fire into the interval between the two Indiana regiments and the 104th Illinois to provide some cover until additional troops could arrive. Now, at the same time, the Confederates are finally getting organized to attack. Many of you all went on Anton's walk this morning and know about the command problems within the Confederate high command that morning. A day dawn attack did not go off at day dawn because the orders for that attack and the orders for the reorganization had not filtered down the chain of command. And when day dawn came, and Bragg, having arisen at his headquarters at Bedford's Ford, Bragg did not hear the sound of battle open to the north, and then began rapidly to extend southward by division along the length of his line. When staff officers begin to ride out that morning to find out what is wrong, both staff officers, Right Wing Commander Leonidas Pope and Braxton Bragg himself, they find that the orders have not been distributed down the chain of command, and since the troops of John Cable Breckinridge's and Patrick Cleburne's divisions, the two divisions of Hill's Corps, who were supposed to open the attack, since they have not eaten in 24, 36, or 48 hours, and the food for yesterday has just arrived at dawn, the order to eat had been given, and the men of those two divisions are having the boiled beef, cornbread, and parched corn distributed to them to consume. Having not eaten in 24, 36, 48 hours, how combat effective were those men until after they had consumed that meal? Finally, the orders for the attack are received, but by that time, they have to allow the men to eat. As a result, more than 3 hours of daylight have passed before the Confederates are able or ready to actually attack. But that morning, as John Cable Breckinridge, the former Vice President of the United States between March of 1857 and March of 1861, but now fighting for Southern independence and the establishment of the Confederate States of America, when John Cable Breckinridge that morning had deployed his division out to the east of where we are now, based on some reconnaissance by Nathan Bedford Forrest and Breckinridge himself, that division had been deployed on a line that from north to south that was located about 1,200 yards to the east of the Lafayette Road. And that reconnaissance, while not thorough and complete because of Union skirmishers out to the east of the road, that reconnaissance had suggested to Forrest and Breckinridge that if Breckinridge aligned his division with Adams' Louisiana Brigade on the Reed's Bridge, this right flank on and just across the Reed's Bridge Road on the north, with Stovall's brigade in the middle and Helm's brigade to the south, that most, if not all, of Breckinridge's division would be beyond the end of the main Union line. And Breckinridge had indeed done that. His line stretching over 3/4 of a mile from north to south, and starting out to the east of the Lafayette Road. When they finally move forward at about 9:30, the skirmish line pushes forward and moves only a couple hundred yards before they encounter Federal skirmishers. Down on the left hand of Breckinridge's line, where Helm's brigade is moving forward, those skirmishers have the shortest distance to go before they encounter the Federal skirmishers, and a fight erupts towards the left of Breckinridge's line. But in the center, where Stovall, and on the right, where Adams are located, their skirmishers push a little bit further to the west before they encounter Federals. As Stovall push westward, their skirmishers encounter the skirmishers of the 104th Illinois and 15th Kentucky of Beatty's brigade as they tried to swing up onto the ridge or the low rise in the woods. In this area, as Adams' skirmishers push westward, they encounter the skirmishers of the Indianans as these two Indiana regiments try to swing off to face to the east as well. And the fight begins. The skirmishers of both sides will fall back, and the main lines will become engaged. For Adams' brigade, their fight in the woods just to the east of where we are now is not long, because their brigade line dramatically overlaps the short regimental line of these two Indiana regiments. The Indiana regiments, both right and left, are threatened, and there is a gap of several hundred yards between the Indianans' right and the left of the 104th Illinois, and some of Adams and Stovall's men will penetrate into that gap or space. And after only a few minutes' time, the Indianans of those two regiments are going to collapse and begin to flee westward. As they do, the Louisianans, with their 1 Alabama regiment, will come out of the woods, push on to the open field in the McDonald farm on the other side of the road, and redeploy skirmishers who began to push forward. As the skirmishers push forward, they find some artillery parked along the road here, allowing Adams' brigade to claim that they could capture artillery. What is this artillery? In actuality, it's some damaged and abandoned artillery vehicles, some caissons and limbers from the batteries of Baird's division that had been badly damaged on the 19th. And the couple of cannon that are out here are actually Confederate cannon. The Confederate victory here at Chickamauga allowed many Confederate artillery battery commanders to obscure the fact in the record that on the 19th, in the fighting, particularly on the Confederate right, several Confederate batteries had lost guns to the Union troops, particularly in the fighting in the area of Winfrey Field. And those Union troops had recovered those guns, or claimed those guns on the 19th, brought them back here. But without sufficient horses and equipment, those guns could not be evacuated further. And essentially, Adams' men are recapturing some Confederate guns at this point, which will allow those Confederate artillery officers to take possession of those guns again, and then just conveniently not mention anything in their report about having lost a gun on the day before. Because at the start of the battle they had 4, and how many did they have at the end of the battle? 4. There are even a couple of batteries who take possession of abandoned Union guns to obscure the fact that they had lost one of their guns. So. But Adams' men will think they capture artillery. The skirmishers push across the road, through the buildings of the McDonald farm, up there through the orchard. As the skirmishers do, the 5th Company of the Washington Artillery comes dashing out of the Reedsbridge Road there and onto this open ground and deploys their guns in their 6 guns in the orchard of the McDonald farm. They unlimber and open fire at the retreating Indianans who are fleeing into the wooded hills to the west of us, the most eastern hills of Missionary Ridge. But as the 5th Company fired, they look to the north. They see less than a mile away, in the distance, through the smoke and dust, they see what looks like a large cluster of Federal soldiers. If Breckinridge's division is attacking from east to west, does Breckinridge want a Federal force on his right flank as he pushes west? No. And the 5th Company Washington Artillery will turn and fire to the north. They don't get the response they expect from that cluster of Federal soldiers. They certainly don't seem to be very hostile, and they don't seem to be getting any closer. They'll lift their fire because they are receiving fire from up at Snodgrass Hill, from Smith's battery that has range to be able to drop shells into all of this open ground. It is later that the 5th Company Washington Artillery discovers that that cluster of Federals they saw up there was a Federal field hospital complex. The field hospitals, Brannan's division and Richard Johnson's division around the Cloud Springs. Several Federal wounded are killed by exploding Confederate artillery projectiles in that hospital complex. But now the main line of Adams' brigade crosses the road and comes up onto the McDonald farm. Seeing the Indianans disappear to the west, Adams' brigade is stopped here on this rise. Stovall's brigade has chased the 104th Illinois out of the woods and across this field. The 104th Illinois and the 15th Kentucky are withdrawing off to the southwest and south down the Lafayette Road and into the woods just due south of us. And Stovall will bring his small brigade out to the edge of the Lafayette Road. And now, where at last is a Confederate division? On the Lafayette Road, where to the north or left or on the Union left. Between what? Between the Union Army and Chattanooga. Is Bragg finally having some of the success that he has been seeking for the last 2 days? Yes. John Cable Breckinridge rides out into this open area himself, rides out to the Lafayette Road, recognizing what is being achieved. He hears the roar of battle to the southeast of him, the attack of part of Helm's brigade against the main part of the Union line. He knows that the main Union line is somewhere to the south, but this ground is under fire of Union artillery, the guns of Smith's battery on Snodgrass Hill, and several federal batteries, including Bridges Battery for a time, and batteries in Kelly Field begin to fire up in this area. Can he stay out here in this open ground indefinitely?
No.
No. Besides, where's the end of the line? They're supposed to roll up the Union line. It's to the south. And John Cable Breckinridge orders Stovall and Adams to turn their brigades southward. Stovall will do so on the other side of the Lafayette Road, and Adams does so here. But because the Indianans had disappeared off in that direction, and there was still some concern about what that mass of Federals might be up there, Adams has to leave his battalion of skirmishers and one other unit to cover his western and northern area, essentially his new right flank and rear. Adams, with a diminished brigade, now turns south, wheels south on this ground, and begins to push southward. At the same time, the 5th Company, Washington Artillery, looking to support their infantry as best as possible, now looks for another place from which to fire. And as Adams' line pushes south, the 6 guns of the battery limber up and begin moving forward themselves. And now, let's put ourselves in the shoes of Adams, Louisiana, and Alabama Brigade, and the 5th Company of the Washington Artillery, and let's advance southward. Maintenance practice in the 70s, 60s, 50s was painting the tablets, the ones they did paint. Lots and lots of the ones in the woods had no paint on them at all. But the ones that could be seen from the roads, how they painted them that was a winter job. And so they would drive around with a pickup truck, load tablets into the back of the pickup truck, take them down to the shop and paint them, and then drive back out and put them back out. And they weren't real careful in putting them back out. And so there were lots of tablets in the wrong place. And I and Mac Wyckoff and Bobby Hush and Dale Phillips and some others, we spent a lot of time trying to get that corrected. They went to painting the tablets in the field, which reduced that issue. Now they've gone back to allowing the painting in the shop, and that has brought the issue of tablet backs. I purposely paused here so that some of you all are on both sides of this wet weather drainage. We're having difficulty crossing it, are we not? This is an obstacle on the battlefield. It's an obstacle not only for the Louisianans and Alabamans who have to go down across through it. Now, it would have been dry in 1863 because of the drought, but it's even more of an obstacle for whom? The artillery of the 5th Company. They cannot cross this ditch just at any point. They are going to have to cross where the road went over. Now, there was no bridge, but the road sloped down, solid bottom, and then out the other side. But they're under fire, or potentially under fire, to put all of the vehicles in column to pass one by one through that narrow area. It's a choke point would potentially allow the enemy to mass fire at that one place. But they have to do that if they're going to push forward. And so the battery, which had been deployed at proper intervals, 14 yards between the guns, now has to move in the column of single vehicles. And one after the other, they have to go over to the road, cross the wet weather drainage, and then come up and resume the proper intervals, the proper deployment between the guns. So imagine this column of 12 vehicles, 6 guns and 6 caissons, filing there one after the other through that narrow space and then up out of this low ground.
Dodge grass spur?
Well, it is now. There were woods right up here at the time, and that block of woods was about 300 yards wide, and so the Snodgrass spur would be through this finger of woods that stuck up. It would be right over in this direction. Now that block of woods also at the time seems to have been lower trees. Not as mature.
Their field of view would have been, because of lower trees, they would have been able to see down in here from Snodgrass.
Well, yes, their view to right here was probably not that great. But having observed, but up there, that was very good. Having observed these Confederates push southward, Smith seems to have been firing probably a little blind, but just knowing the enemy has advanced down this way, he seems to be firing just kind of into this area, because this will come under artillery fire. So, back there in the woods, just beginning right there, had a question about where Snodgrass Hill, the Snodgrass Spur, is located. It is off to our west-southwest from right here. Less than a mile away, straight line distance. At the time of the Civil War, the woods that were right over here that only came up to the McFarland Gap Road at this point were probably younger, shorter trees based on the soldier accounts and descriptions. This area here in the woods and south for almost half a mile and stretching westward for half a mile is an area that has been very badly damaged and disrupted by the presence there of the Women's Army Corps Training Center here in World War II. That facility was capable of training 8,000 WACs at a time. And after the facility, after the war ended and the Women's Army Corps was much reduced in size, the buildings were used for a short time as emergency housing for returning World War II soldiers as they got themselves on their feet out in their communities. And then, when the complex was removed, all they did was sell off the buildings. They did not remove most of the foundations and other things. And so that area has grown up and is quite a tangle today. 30 years ago, when I first worked here, and not that he's as old, but he can testify for me to this, John Sanders, who's back there too, 30 years ago, when you were up on the open spur at Snodgrass Hill, looking to the north, you could see the flag at the visitor center. And in 1982, when I first was here, you could see a lot of the flagpole, and every day you could see the flag at the visitor center. What has happened over the last 30 years is all these trees that have grown up on the Women's Army Corps Training Center, and even right here, have gotten older, taller, they've matured, and today there's not even a time in the winter when you can see the flag when it's out at full view. But I have that memory from years ago, which helps me understand what I see on the maps of the landscape, the terrain, and reading the accounts. And hence, the greater importance of those guns up there in at least putting some fire on this ground. So. Now, as Adams' infantry attacks southward, the 5th Company Washington Artillery pushes forward on this side of the wet weather drainage and deploys. But they don't have anything to shoot at that particular moment because they are too close to the woods in this direction to fire effectively at whatever fire is coming from over there. Smith seems to be firing a few shells, probably a little blindly, into this area, knowing that the Confederates had advanced down into the area. Adams' brigade advances south into the woods. And so the gunners of the 5th Company are standing by their guns. There is an occasional artillery projectile exploding in the area. Do you need to needlessly expose the crew members of your battery if they can't be firing at that time? No. And so each of the gun detachments is ordered to put their men under cover, which is the wet weather drainage. And so the guns, or the limbers and caissons, are moved into the low ground, as well as the men. And the guns, with just a skeletal number of crew members, are left on this line. But sitting amongst the guns is Major Rice C. Graves, the Breckinridge's division chief of artillery, and Captain Slocum, the battery commander. And an artillery projectile comes sailing in, probably from up on Snodgrass Hill, although there is a chance that it could have come up the corridor of the Lafayette Road, and that projectile explodes and will mortally wound Rice Graves, who will be carried to the rear, and he'll die in the same structure where later in the day the Benjamin Hardin Helm will die as well. But the battery here is in position, trying to support the infantry as best as possible. But they're going to have to wait for a while for the infantry to have more success before they can push forward and maybe find a point from which they can open fire. But their ability to do that now is somewhat diminished, with the division chief of artillery going down as a casualty. First being carried to the shade of the lone tree on the wet weather drainage, and then moved to the field hospital to the rear. Let's continue the infantry advance to the south.
There a few days ahead to review the battlefield. But today is like it's nice to understand the movement of the
Well, I've got folks all around me now, which I guess that's okay. But I pause here and put some folks on the line of Bridges, Illinois Battery. The battery, as Beatty's brigade, I should say, we're going back in time just a few minutes right now. As Beatty's brigade attempted to conduct this wheel up onto the low rise of ground in the woods there, Bridges Battery was moved up here to the edge of the woods to cover the interval between the Indiana regiments, the 104th Illinois, and the 15th Kentucky. Subsequently, the battery is split into half batteries, and half of the battery is sent further to the north to try to do that. But when Breckinridge's attack began, John Beatty and Lyman Bridges decided that having the guns spread or split was not such a good idea, and the half battery that had been sent up to the north is recalled, and they come down and deploy on the left end of the gun line. Well, they are firing into the interval between the 104th Illinois and the Indiana regiments there. They have an oblique fire on the left of Adams' brigade and the right of Stovall's brigade. And as they are banging away, firing at those Confederates, they fail to notice something. At the same time, Helm's brigade, the left of Breckinridge's division, is attacking from east to west. And as they do, the left end of the brigade is close enough to the main part of the Union line that they wind up attacking at that point. But the right half of Helm's brigade, the 4th and 6th Kentucky, and part of the Alabama regiment continue westward through the woods and under the cover of forest, driving the 15th Kentucky Union in their front. And the fact that Kentucky Confederates drive Kentucky Union troops is the reason why the Kentucky Monument to both its northern and southern troops is on this ground. The 15th Kentucky is driven out of the woods and off to the southwest. Bridges Battery is focused in this direction. What did they not see? Approach under the cover of forest at just a short distance to their right, that infantry. As those Kentuckians approach the road, seeing the guns on this side of the road, they halt and deliver a volley, devastating the right section of Bridges Battery. Lyman Bridges will order the battery to displace, to move on and to the west. He rides in amongst the devastated section to try to save those 2 guns, but is unsuccessful. And he does get the other 4 guns off, moving to the west. They will move up, and at least for a time, be up on Snodgrass Hill as well, firing from that open spur. The Kentuckians cross the road, celebrating the capture of the artillery, earning the right to have cross cannons inverted, painted on their battle flag. Also, as Breckinridge rides in amongst them, it gives them a chance to guy him about an incident that had occurred earlier, where he chastised some of them for some less than proper acquisition of some items, some foraging. Now, having captured these guns, those Kentuckians say, "What do you think about your Kentuckians now, General, having captured these 2 cannon on the battlefield?" But as they get these guns, Breckinridge learns that Benjamin Hardin Helm has been wounded and carried to the rear. The senior colonel in the brigade is Joseph Lewis, who is with this part of the brigade, and Breckinridge orders Lewis to pull this part of the brigade back across the road, reunite it with the other half, and take command of the brigade. This will essentially take Helm's brigade out of the rest of the action. But as the Kentuckians pass back across the other road into the woods, Adams on this side of the road, Stovall on that side of the road, will pass this position and continue heading south astride the Lafayette Road. The north end of Kelly Field. On this graphic, you now see what we're about to do. I've got the graphic oriented basically to north and south with the Lafayette Road, and you now see the red blocks for Stovall and Adams going south on either side of the Lafayette Road. Having attacked from the east to the west, they have crossed the Lafayette Road at the McDonald Farm area. They've now turned southward, and they're driving down the corridor of the road. And what are they headed to? The end of the Union line. Now, they don't know exactly where the end it works for you all right to do it this time. They are good. It depends exactly where the end of the Union line is located. But as they push through this area right here, they will pass the end of the Union line. The two markers and tablets that you see right over here mark where John Beatty's brigade had first been deployed. They are on the left of Dodge's brigade, which is on the left of the regular brigade at the bend or angle in the Union line. Beatty, of course, had been deployed further to the north, swinging eastward, and is gone. But it serves for us as a marker. As we advance southward from this point on, we are now essentially where? Behind the Union line. Is Breckinridge achieving success? As Adams and Stovall go south, they are passing behind the end of the Union line. We have reached the high water mark of Adams' attack. In the woods just over here, you're looking at the back of the two cast iron tablets to Adams' brigade. This is how far Dan Adams' brigade gets on the morning of September the 20th. Where's the end of the Union line? Where is the bend or angle? Tour stop number 2. It's off in that direction. Adams is behind the Union line. Now we'll deal with Stovall in a couple of minutes. But Stovall is on the other side of the road. He doesn't get quite this far south, but Stovall is behind the Union line as well. What does Breckinridge need? Reinforcements. Troops for exploitation. Troops to hand the fight over to continue the pressure on the enemy. He has sent all of his staff officers off in search of troops, including his 16-year-old son, Cable. But none are going to come, because while there are other Confederate troops, Walker's Reserve Corps, and even potentially Cheatham's division, that could well have been used by Polk for a more massed assault in this area, there hasn't been any of that prior planning. And because Breckinridge is attacking here, and there is a gap between Breckinridge's sector and where Pat Claiborne is attacking to our southeast, Polk and Daniel Harvey Hill become far more concerned about the space between Breckinridge and Claiborne than exploiting Breckinridge's success. And part of the Reserve Corps is used to try to fill that gap. Now, William Henry Talbot Shot Pouch Walker, not knowing anything about Breckinridge's success, when he is told to start feeding his brigades one at a time to Daniel Harvey Hill, is not at all happy. His small corps, badly battered by the fighting of the day before, he knows is only going to have any impact on the battlefield if all 5 of its brigades attack at one time. William Henry Talbot Shot Pouch Walker is probably the one Confederate general here who is most truly desirous of Southern independence, willing to give up everything, including his life, as he will not quite a year later in the Battle of Atlanta, for Southern independence. He wants to make dead blue bodies on the battlefield and win that Southern independence. When told to give Gist's brigade to Hill, he says no, it'll break up what little power my Reserve Corps has. But he is told to do that, and he and Hill bow up at one another, and their staff actually have to pull the two apart before they start swinging at one another. Walker's troops will wind up being piecemealed into action. I'll mention just a little bit briefly later on. But there are no troops to come to Breckinridge's assistance. There are out there but they're too far away, and there's nobody to coordinate that effort. Breckinridge gets this far and is going to be stopped, because now the true nature of the Union line really begins to manifest itself. The Union line this day is not a single line of troops. It is a line of lines. Almost 2 lines of troops at every point. In some places, there are 3 and 4 lines of troops. And what end of the Union line do the Union commanders, from Rosecrans to Thomas to the division commanders, Baird, Johnson, Palmer, Reynolds, and others, what end of the line do they all know is most important? The left end of the line, their way to Chattanooga. And this knowledge is filtered down to lower and lower levels. And now, as this threat develops on the left, it's not only William Stark Rosecrans and George Thomas who began to react by sending troops in this way, but it is also division commanders like Richard Johnson, who sends his reserve brigade under William Gross in this direction. But also individual, regimental, and battery commanders react and turn this way towards stemming this Confederate threat. And Adams' men have now gone as far as they can, because appearing in front of them are Federal troops. Some rallied fragments of the 104th Illinois at 15th Kentucky, but other units are coming up from the south, including George Dick's brigade from Van Cleve's division. There you are. Let's see, if I'm not mistaken, that is a Dick tablet right over there. Or that one might be Stanley, but somewhere along in here there's a Dick tablet. So, with 1,000 of them on the battlefield, I don't always remember exactly. So, Dick's brigade is amongst the units that is coming up. Stanley's brigade of Negley's division, having finally been relieved from further to the south, arrives, and it helps first stop Adams and then begin to throw him back. And other individual units will arrive as well. And soon, a Federal counterattack is mounted, and Adams begins to be pushed back. Here at this high water mark of Adams' brigade also, Dan Adams is wounded and falls from his horse. For the artillerists of Slocum's battery, the first indication that their brigade commander has been wounded is when his riderless horse is seen coming galloping out of the woods in the direction from which the brigade has advanced. Adams is left laying on the ground as the brigade begins to withdraw in the face of the advancing Federal counterattack. The 11th Michigan of Stanley's brigade will pass over the rotund and badly injured Dan Adams and claim capturing him. But carrying him is quite a chore. They take a few souvenirs, move him a short distance, and leave him, thereby setting up the circumstance where multiple Federal units claim capturing Dan Adams. Each one of them seemingly moving him a short distance, each one of them deciding then that simply taking souvenirs to prove that they had captured a Confederate general is better than carrying a wounded, overweight Confederate general. There are multiple units that claim capturing Dan Adams. I sometimes think that his uniform probably had no buttons, any sort of insignia on it by the time he finally did make it to a field hospital. He's carried into Chattanooga, will recover, eventually trade it back into to Confederate lines. But now Adams is being repulsed. How far behind the Union line have they gotten? Is this not what Bragg has been trying to do for 2 days now? Let's see if we can see what happens to Stovall. Yeah. The high water mark of Stovall's brigade in this attack. The way we had to do it, it's a little hard to see, but where we were on Adams' line there, we were just a little bit further to the south than we are here on Stovall's line. The reason Adams makes it a little bit further to the south is he's moving in the cover of the forest. He's got some cover and concealment. Stovall's men moved down through these woods and arrived here at the north end of the Kelly Field. Now the wood edge here probably needs to be just a few yards, a little bit closer to us. This field seems to be today a little bit too big on the north side and just a very tad little bit too small on the south side. But Stovall's men arrived at the edge of the woods, and seeing the open ground in their front, they paused. That pause allows Adams to make it just a short distance further to the south. Stovall's men pause to gather a little bit of strength and to prepare, because as they look out of the woods and across the field, the north end of the field having some waist-high grass in it, they see some scattered Union soldiers, some elements of Gross's brigade, even part of Dodge's brigade, scattering back across the field. They of course see Union mounted officers and couriers riding across the field. There's dust and smoke being driven up out of this cornfield and the grass. But as they look beyond all of that, what do they see arrayed across the field and facing them? Some batteries of artillery. Yes, the regular batteries and Battery A, 1st Ohio Light Artillery, are a dominating sight there. But what is the privilege of capturing enemy guns in battle, or putting the cross cannons inverted on your flag? Do these men, the men of the 47th Georgia, 60th North Carolina, and the Floridians, do they want to add the cross cannons inverted to their flag? Might they capture some guns? As they gather their strength for the effort to capture the guns, there is a brief pause. And then they surge out of the woods into the north end of the field to try to get the guns. But they have not noticed, or they have not been here long enough to have seen what has happened over the last few minutes. As all this threat has developed, Ferdinand Vanderveer's brigade, or Brannan's division, in reserve in Brannan's sector to the south, has been ordered to the north. He had moved into the south end of the Kelly Field, and then moving the brigade closer to where the expected threat was, had moved up into the north end of the field. And by one account, had deployed the brigade, 2 regiments, the 87th Indiana, the 2nd Minnesota in front, and the 2 Ohio regiments, the 9th and 35th Ohio in the second line, had got them to the north end of the field, and to protect them while he figured out what was going on, he had them lie down in the north end of the field, in the brown, waist-high grass. Stovall's men had not seen that. And now, as Stovall's men rush out of the woods and into the open field, all of a sudden, a few of those Federals who are visible manifest what they really represent. Because all of a sudden, within those regiments, the command, rise up, and out of the grass stands 4 regiments of Federal soldiers. And the 2 lead regiments, the 87th Indiana and the 2nd Minnesota, open fire, and a devastating volley is blasted into the faces of Stovall's brigade. They will withdraw into the edge of into the woods a short distance, take cover behind the trees. The 2nd Minnesota and 87th Indiana rush up to the edge of the woods just a few yards away, and at a short distance of just 50 or 60 yards, there is a firefight for some time at the edge of the woods. The Confederates under cover of the trees, and the 2nd Minnesota and 87th Indiana out here in the open. They'll suffer terrible casualties as a result. But soon the Confederate fire is sensed to slacken in their front, and Ferdinand Vanderveer will order a counterattack. He'll order the 9th and 35th Ohio to attack through the 2nd Minnesota and 87th in Indiana, and they will push forward and into the woods and begin driving Stovall back. Now, Vanderveer will say that the Confederate fire slackened because of the fire of his 2 Minnesota and Indiana regiments. In actuality, by this time, Adams' men are withdrawing. Stanley and Dick's brigade and other Federals are pushing back in that direction. They're starting to go around Stovall's right flank, and Stovall's going to have to start withdrawing or be flanked. But from these combinations of things, now Adams is in withdrawal, and so is Stovall. And the high water mark of Breckinridge's attack has passed. Imagine this scene across the field. Those artillery batteries, dozens of 6-mule baggage wagons that carried ammunition, a growing impromptu field hospital complex around the Kelly farmstead, piles of Union knapsacks across this field. So many Union knapsacks dropped here by Brannan's division, Johnson's division, and others that observers at the end of the battle said that the field was black with Union knapsacks. But Stovall's men and Adams' men go no further and are now in withdrawal to the rear. Questions or observations?
Which Florida regiments were Stovall?
This is the 1st and 3rd and 4th in this brigade.
And there was the North Carolina regiment too?
Yes, the 60th North Carolina. Yep. And they have another monument for Chickamauga on the Buncombe County Courthouse grounds. As you approach the main entrance, it's off to the left and fenced in. It's very hard to read because it was designed of a very poor stone, and the Park Commission refused to accept it for erection here on the battlefield. And subsequently, they put up that marker to the 60th.
Jen, where'd the other 60th was?
It's on the grounds of the Buncombe County Courthouse in Asheville.
Oh, okay.
All righty.
Where was Rosecrans?
I'm sorry?
Where was Rosecrans?
Rosecrans had ridden on back south on the line, and by this time he is on an open knoll in the Dyer Field right behind Wood's division.
How long would the line have been? Like from the road all the way out to the 2nd line?
What line? The 2nd Minnesota line? Well, they've lost troops the day before. I think that monument is probably a pretty fair representation of the center of the regiment. They put maybe 70 yards either side of the monument.
How long did this action take place out here?
This action begins about 9:30. The high water mark of this attack is between 11 and 11:30. So now something else happens during this time and just a little after 11.
Go on.
Well, he'll come later, but it is the breakthrough to the south of us. One of the things that is usually forgotten is that the high water mark of this attack is occurring at the same time that the breakthrough is occurring. All right. We're going to make 1 or 2 more stops to be able to get back to the visitor center and conclude this program.